Ooh, that old Fox logo. Romancing the Stone, released in 1984 and directed by Robert Zemeckis. Starring Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner, and Danny DeVito. Production cost of $10 million, a domestic take of $76 million, an international take of also $10 million, for a worldwide total of $86 million, and the profit is back to $76. How very convenient. Characters. Well, there are two main characters and four notable support characters. You got Jack and Joan, the two brothers who deal in illegal artifacts, the general slash secret police leader slash villainous bad guy, and the randomly amusing cartel boss. Jack and Joan are your classic adventure leads. Jack is tough, he's independent, he's a bit of a mercenary, he's a bit of a rogue, always got his own agenda, always looking out for himself. And as per romantic comedies like this, Joan is a dreamer and wildly out of her depth running around in Colombia. Charisma and chemistry between Douglas and Turner really does actually make a difference on this. It feels like a classic old school romance adventure, which, well, it is, obviously. The two brothers are suitably entertaining villainous plot devices. DeVito's character keeps turning up in unlikely scenarios, constantly trying to get hold of the map, or Joan, or both. The brother on the boat, suitably mean and nasty, and mainly there to provide exposition and push the story along. The main bad guy, the primary villain in this, interesting. He's your very classic corrupt cop slash general. You're left to connect the dots on your own to figure out why he's doing what he's doing. And he's doing everything from visiting America and stabbing people through to commanding a small mercenary army. He seems to have a wide scope of nefarious activities and titles. Thing is, they never actually give you his motive. You're just left to assume that it's greed. This guy's a cracker. I like him. First he's a bit of a villain until it's revealed that he's actually a fan of Joan Wilder and all of her books. And then he turns into a bit of a fanboy, desperate to please, and actually helps save the day. It was unusual, an unusual turn for the character and quite an enjoyable one. Overall, the characters are good. I mean, they're good characters. They're largely unbelievable in almost every sense. But then again, it's that sort of movie. It's a wild adventure through the Colombian forest. It doesn't have to make sense in a lot of ways. You're just there for the ride. Characters are an easy 3. Story. Well, the story's quite well done, really. For this type of movie, for this type of setting, and when this was filmed, it's actually quite a bit of fun. In fact, this one kind of builds on the templates that have come before it to the point where it is actually pretty much a template for future movies. I'd forgotten that Joan was a writer. And so when the movie opens, it actually felt like a badly done Western to begin with. I was very confused. But there's not really much to say about the story other than it's a classic adventure done quite well. Silly. Quite silly. But an entertaining silly and a fairly plausible silly in that way that you can suspend your disbelief long enough and well enough to enjoy yourself. The way they establish Joan Wilder is good, and the way they get the plot hook to get her to Colombia. It's the classic, we've got your sister, her dead husband sent you a thing that we want, come to Colombia and deliver it, and we'll hand over the girl. Fairly standard MacGuffin ransom scenario. Things get complicated when the corrupt cop tricks her into getting on the wrong bus, resulting in her being stranded in the middle of the Colombian forest, being chased by authorities, and the smugglers, relying on Jack, who she runs into out there, to get her safely to Cartagena. And thus begins the romance story. He's an untrustworthy scoundrel mercenary, she's a somewhat vulnerable, somewhat naive traveller, and lost in the wilderness. She doesn't trust him or like him, he sees her as an inconvenient payday. And thus the story flows along in its merry little way as they slowly fall for each other. It's got all the familiar twists, the accusations, the suspected betrayals, his baseline greed versus his developing feelings for her reluctance to get attached versus her overwhelming desire to find true love and romance. The fact that she's a hopeless romantic romance novelist is so stereotypical, but also so excellent. It really does work in this case. And in amongst all this is Danny DeVito's character, popping up every now and then like a very angry man in a suit, frustrated at his brother, frustrated at Joan, frustrated at everyone, and doing a lot of his trademark tirades, getting very cranky and running his mouth into a phone or someone's face. And that was quality to watch. Danny DeVito getting mad and yelling at people is always excellent value. But it all wraps up with him finally convincing her to go after the treasure, so they've got extra leverage. And of course, inevitably, once they've got the stone, DeVito's character turns up, then the general turns up, then everyone turns up. It's a chase, it's cat and mouse. They get away, but then they've got to get to Cartagena. Then they get to Cartagena, got to hand over the gem. And they hand over the gem, and much to my surprise, the brother who's done the kidnapping actually honors his deal and hands over the sister. But then, of course, the general turns up, arrests everybody in sight. Then there's a fight. It's all very dramatic, and the general proves incredibly hard to kill. Loses his hand, I think he gets stabbed, he gets set on fire, and then eaten by a bunch of alligators. As for the story score, look, I'm going to go ahead and I'm probably going to be giving this one a 3.5, because it was just fun. Admittedly silly, admittedly kind of stupid, but gee, it was fun, and it was just an enjoyable adventure story. Gave you everything you needed, but didn't overdo any particular aspect. Look and feel. Well, to begin with, I'm pretty sure nearly all of this movie was filmed on a location. They used many sets. They looked like they were kind of like large-scale sets, like in the backlots, like a full-on fake town that they've set up somewhere. Always like in an apartment or a bedroom. Other than that, they're on the road, they're in the jungle, they're all over the place. And again, even if they weren't in Colombia, they were at least out in a field somewhere. These felt like location settings. So if any of them were actually filmed on a studio set, in some big hangar or something, they did a really good job at blending them all together. Costumes look good. The equipment and the gear and the vehicles and the guns and all that sort of stuff from that era and that location and part of the world, that all looked very authentic. It sold you on what you were watching. You believed they were running around in the jungles of Colombia. There was a couple of shots that looked real enough that you could smell the sweat and the grime and feel the humidity that they were suffering through. I did have to laugh in a lot of the jungle scenes where it's meant to be raining. It was pouring down. Quite accurate representation of the serious rainfall you can get in those sorts of environments. The dirt and the mud and the rocks and the rain. They were getting absolutely filthy. I wonder if the actors were enjoying themselves. One thing that was quite noticeable every now and then though was some of the film quality. The film quality and the sound quality kept mixing it up. Some of them were just, it was good. Other times it just looked very grainy, very old even. Some of the establishing shots, I can't say the establishing. Many of the establishing shots looked like stock footage, which is kind of annoying. It wasn't there for long and it wasn't very often, but the film quality noticeably degraded every time they did. They also did the thing where bullets would hit trees and you'd hear the ricochet sound. I never understood why they did that. At least you didn't have car tires screeching on gravel roads. Or the good old Kookaburra call appearing in the entirely wrong continent. But on the whole, everywhere felt authentic. All the little villages and towns and locations they went to felt like it fit the scenario. Apart from the big fort at the end, for some reason you've got the base of operations for these smugglers. It looks like a historic location. I'm not sure how. Or maybe they were just visiting. Maybe they were just visiting because they weren't based on a boat. So maybe they just pulled up on the boat, everyone jumped off, and they're doing their dealing in the old fort. That'd make more sense. It wasn't entirely clear at the beginning. So my other question is, why were there alligators like everywhere at this fort? Everywhere you turn around, there's an alligator in a pit. Is that a thing? I wonder if that's a thing. I'll have to look that up. Anyhow, score for look and feel. It was realistic enough. It sold the setting. Okay? Even though the audio quality is not always that great and the film quality goes up and down, it successfully immersed you in its locations. So for that, I'm very happy to give it a 3. It had been higher, except that stock footage is just so very stock. Script, well, it's a somewhat cheesy romantic adventure movie, so what exactly are you expecting? So is it from the 80s, and does actually have that 80s music. But at the same time, for something that's billed as a comedy, they really didn't try to overdo the comedy. In fact, most of the jokes worked for themselves. Like, it was situational comedy, it was people pulling faces, hiding from things, making a statement and then a thing happened. Or it was Danny DeVito losing his temper, which will never fail to amuse me. Or it was other things like that, some general on-screen developments that don't always need words. They let the actors act out emotions and feelings and development. And you could see it. You could really see it coming through. I mean, Turner, Douglas and DeVito, they're very good with their face. Also displaying some very clever timing for characters walking past each other or appearing as things as being said. Very tight in that respect. And the dialogue between the main characters was largely believable. I mean, cheesy, yeah, cliche, very much so. But it still worked for the environment and the setting. And the two brothers were very hammy, very over the top, but they were always that way, and I don't think their characters would have worked if they weren't. Now, I've been saying quite a few nice things, and you're probably expecting there's a but coming up, and there is a but, and this is the but. This guy, as far as the main villain was concerned, is a bit of a drag. He does a lot of posing and serious staring. He'll pop his knife every now and then and give people a sinister look, or drag upon a cigarette. You know, very classic Colombian corrupt general villain stuff. I always found it funny how these sorts of villains will pop up in any movie of any genre at any time. He just wasn't interesting. He was nothing more than a device. He started off as kind of interesting, but after the bus crash, he just turns into Mr. Generic brooding bad guy. And it was a bit of a shame. Plus, he didn't say anything of interest at all. Ever. The romance stuff was kind of tacky, as you'd expect, but at the same time, the tacky lines that Joan Wilder's coming out with, you're not terribly surprised with, because she's a romance novelist. And Douglas's gravelly voice can pretty much sell anything until you think about it too much. So as for the script, on the whole, it was pretty good. Quite enjoyable, no real pitfalls, nothing that really made it stand out as excellent, but the negatives weren't really that bad either. So this one, with a plus and a minus, ends up at a 3 as well. Not bad for an 80s romantic action movie. This could have been so much worse. Fun factor. Look, you have fun with this. Honestly, it's that movie that you forget about. You forget that it's out there, you forget that it exists, then you pick it up and go, hey, I remember that, let's watch that again. Or in my case, hey, I remember seeing this once, I can't remember anything else. And to be honest, you don't regret the time. It's fun enough. I mean, sure, there's other things you could have watched, and there's probably other things you would watch, but you don't come out of this regretting the option. Unless, of course, you really don't like romantic action and adventure movies from the 80s, at which point this would be like poison. Actually, yeah, this is an 80s movie that I don't kind of hate. So I'm going to be going ahead and giving this one a 3 as well. Could have been better, but much like Script, this could have been so much worse. Final score time. Add them all together, you get a 15.5. A fairly generic score for a pretty generic movie, but slightly better because it wasn't that bad at all. Is this the sort of movie I'd recommend? Sure, why not? If you haven't seen this one, check it out. Now, keeping in mind when this is made, I'm sure you'll recognize an endless stream of adventure tropes that have been used forever and will be used forevermore. And while I was filming this, I remembered that there's a sequel, Jewel of the Nile. I think I've got that up here, actually. Yep, turns out I do. So I suppose that's next on the list, or at least very soon. I'll have to see if the trend of good but not terrible continues. Anyhow, there's my review of Romancing the Stone. What did you think? Have you seen the movie? And when did you first see this particular film? Please comment down below or on the Facebook page. As usual, like, share and subscribe. And as always, I hope you're having a great week and that you find some time to go and watch a movie.